Satou gets rejected by Shio, and of course her entire world crumbles into an absolute hellscape. Hello my friends, are you ready to get creeped out? It's time to talk about another episode of Happy Sugar Life, an episode which seems like it is slowly building up to the big fiery finale of the series. This episode right here was certainly a roller coaster, the first half being dedicated a little bit more to Shio's backstory and learning how she was actually separated from her mother in the first place. We were never given this information until this episode, and before that I actually speculated that she just simply ran away from her mother in a bit of fear. However, we get to learn that it's actually a lot more tragic than that in this episode. I also want to give Shio some credit. She's a lot smarter than I actually thought that she was. She's finally starting to realize that everything in this apartment is not exactly normal or stable. When you start finding bloody footprints all over the floor and the laundry is filled with blood-covered clothes, you know that something's not quite right. She pretty much knows that Satou killed that girl who came into the apartment, and she's completely freaked out by the entire concept of it, to the point where she actually starts hating Shio and wanting to run away from her. A lot of that, though, is owed to the fact that it actually reminds her of her relationship with her incredibly overbearing mother. A mother who, despite loving her child, was slowly being driven insane by the stress of being in a relationship with a crazed, abused, alcoholic husband, and the fact that she's constantly waiting for her son, who may or may not return. That, and of course the horror of potentially losing her daughter to an accident in real life, causes her to go through many different shifts in personality. 1 minute she's happy, 1 minute she's sad, 1 minute she's scary as fuck. It reaches a boiling point where one day she and her mother actually decided to go out and just go on a walk in town. This was basically the first moment that Shio had actually ever seen anything outside in the real world, and she gets too happy in one moment and accidentally almost gets run over by a freaking car, Yusuke Urameshi style. Luckily her mother saves her, but at this point realizes that there's no place for her in the outside world and locks her in the house indefinitely. She's basically banned from ever going outside. This moment is absolutely horrifying for how incredibly realistic it is, as you can constantly see her different personalities pushing and pulling against one another. 1 minute she's mad and abusive and actually ends up slapping Shio, a moment that completely disgusts and horrifies her as she realizes that she's slowly becoming an abusive parent just like her husband. But then something even more disturbing happens. She realizes that there's only one way to get rid of all of these negative feelings and to be free from all of this torture, and that quite simply is to abandon her daughter. She takes Shio outside to an alleyway where it's raining at night and simply just leaves her there, like a dog that she doesn't want anymore. And honestly, it's just heartbreaking to see. This is the moment where Shio's entire view on parents and relationships was sort of skewed, until that moment where Satou came into her life, found her, and decided to take her in. She realizes that she might have been abandoned by her family, but there's still some good in the world from Satou, despite the fact that Satou has no problem with jamming knives into people's necks. The rest of the episode, however, is filled with all sorts of crazy, creepy imagery and even some big revelations for Shio as well, where Shio decides to run away from Satou, locking herself in a room, and even claiming that she hates her at this point, simply realizing that to her, she's basically just a living doll for Satou. She really has no free will of her own. In many ways, it's just as bad as being with her mother, and if it means that she has to live that life, well, she doesn't want to do that anymore. She's not going to be anyone's plaything. The moment where she says that she hates Satou, you can just see Satou's entire world absolutely crumble. The expressions that she has during the sequence where she's desperately trying to get Shio to return to her are honestly some of the most disturbing, images that I've actually seen from the entire series. She has a complete and utter breakdown in this moment, and eventually Shio does come out and apologizes to her, and this is when Satou finally decides to actually tell her the truth about what happened. She outright admits that she killed a person, and in order for them to be safe and love one another, they're going to have to leave. They're going to have to get out, and what's so fascinating about this is that the characters themselves are so incredibly similar, but so different at the same time. They both genuinely seem to care about one another, with Sato's viewpoint still being something of that of a parent, but it's still kind of hard to say, and Shio just looking for any sort of companion or someone that she can simply trust. And Sato, so far in her life, has actually been the most stable person, which, when you actually think about it, whew, that is fucked up. So what's the rundown on this episode of Happy Sugar Life? This was an intense episode, to say the least. The entire backstory of Shio and her mother was absolutely heartbreaking in the way that it was told, and it's so sad because she's really had no escape or respite from any of these terrible things in her life. Even when she finds something that's somewhat stable and happy with Sato, it's still completely dirtied and muddied by all of the murder and blood and secrets. It's really disturbing stuff, and you would think that she would honestly be a little more horrified after learning that Sato has actually killed someone, but when she admits it in the episode, she's just kind of like, oh, okay, well, sorry you had to do that, and it's a little strange, but again, she's such a small child that some things are still going to be very hard for her to actually comprehend, and ultimately, that's why I always feel so bad for the character of Shio, as she's so small and young, and she doesn't really understand anything around her, and all of these people are just basically taking her for this very disturbing ride, to the point that if she does make it out of this alive, I don't think she's ever going to be a normal person again. As for what Sato ended up doing with Shoko, it's kind of hard to say. I'm not sure where she was able to hide her. And while I was watching this episode, I was thinking that even though she did take the apartment of this one guy, how is she still managing to even live here? How is she paying for the rent? Wouldn't the landlord eventually try to check some of this stuff out? I don't know, it's a little strange. It's these type of things that maybe you shouldn't think about, but I don't know. I'm interested to see where this final part of the series is going to go. It almost kind of makes me wish they didn't show that scene at the very beginning of the series in the first moments where they're on top of a giant burning building, as things don't look like they're going to really end all that well. But I'm imagining it's all going to turn into one hell of a conflict by the end. So this was a pretty awesome episode with, again, some very disturbing imagery and some very hard-hitting moments, and Shio's entire backstory with her mother, just like I said, it absolutely breaks your heart. So I'm giving this episode right here another 5 out of 5, a super atmospheric and fantastic episode of Happy Sugar Life. I think one of the more disturbing shows of the season, and one you should definitely check out if you're into this type of thing. So those are my thoughts on the episode. I'd love to hear yours, and you can tell me all of them in the comment section below, and what you hope to see from the rest of Happy Sugar Life. Thank you guys for watching this review. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay damn down, baby.